Hey, it's Drybear. And today I'd like to ask and answer what in the heck are Karmic Dice in Baldur's Gate 3? You'll find this setting in your gameplay options menu in BG3, and it's a bit mysterious as to what this option actually does. It's on by default, but should you be playing with Karmic Dice or not? So that's what we'll get into today. But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you do come hang out with me in the community on Twitch, then the next time you roll a dice in BG3 without any bonuses and no inspiration, where everything's on the line, you're going to roll a nat 20 and get a critical success. Now, if you're wondering where to find this, it is in your gameplay options. So you open settings, the first tab it defaults to is gameplay. And if you scroll down a little bit, you will find the Karmic Dice option here. And again, it is on by default. Now, this is something that Larian had in previous games and in early access for this game, but they actually renamed it from a different name to Karmic Dice because I think there was a lot of confusion around, should it be in the game? Is it important to have in the game? And what does it actually do? I think they actually like it being a bit mysterious because ultimately, to me, having experience with as a game developer, it seems like they want this on because it makes the gameplay overall better for your average player. But what does this setting actually do? What does it actually have the impact on for the game? So here is the explanation of Karmic Dice. In general, humans tend to have a pretty negative reaction to true randomness. This is something that surprises a lot of people, especially if they don't work in programming or mathematics or anything involving numbers where RNG is a big part of their daily experience. This is actually the best example I give, and I used to give a lot as a game designer to help explain the negative reaction to true randomness, is when we first got music players like iTunes. There was a random feature that was introduced in the first version of iTunes that was widely used by everyone for playing digital music. And what it did is it would just randomly shuffle through the songs you had on iTunes and randomly pick a song to play for you. However, there was a big backlash on this feature because it felt like it was always playing the same songs over and over. And you might actually experience this when you play a playlist on YouTube or you're listening to something on shuffle that doesn't have any additive functions that go on top of that randomness. It starts to feel like sometimes it's not random, quote, because it feels that it's picking the same things over and over or that sort of thing. And so that's kind of one of the problems with true random, especially when it comes to the experience of someone using a dice often, is that random can, yes, be very varied. It can be all over the place, but random can also be very consistent in one direction or the other. You can random the same number or close to the same number many, many times in a row. And so what Larian has decided to do with Baldur's Gate 3 by default is introduce a system called Karmic Dice. And all this does is essentially what I imagine is very similar to what Apple did in the early days of iTunes, is they would add in a smarter pseudo-random system into the shuffling so that if you had heard the song before, it makes a slight leaning towards not hearing that song again. And so it kind of helps shuffle it to keep it a little bit more varied and a little bit more intriguing. And in this game, that's exactly what Karmic Dice does. Karmic Dice tries to avoid streaks of luck. And this works for good luck and it works for bad luck. So it feels like it's more of a subjective randomness that people would expect from randomness without actually experiencing true random, which can be very, very consistent in some cases. And so they make it so that if you go on a loss streak, every time you go on a loss streak, there's systems in there that prevent you from staying on that loss streak. And the same thing goes for win streaks as well, getting 20s and 19s and 18s over and over. It starts to make sure that there's a little bit less consistency in the dice to make it pseudo-random. However, the big thing about Karmic Dice in Baldur's Gate 3 is that when you have this feature on, it is game-wide, which means it's affecting your dice rolls as well as the enemy's dice rolls. So yes, while you will be less likely to go onto a loss streak where you get 1 and then 2 and then 4 and then 2 and then 3, that's less likely, but it's also the same case for the enemies that you're facing. In general, it smooths out the experience and makes it so you get a more varied response or results in the dice itself. And in general, towards the middle to last half of the game, it tends to favor the player in most cases, especially when it comes to dialogue and things like that, because by the time you reach middle to late game, you will have a lot more proficiencies and bonuses and advantages and things that you can cheat the dice with. And when Karmic Dice is on and it's preventing you from getting crazy loss streaks, adding all those bonuses on top means that in general, it tends to favor the player. What they don't mention on the system, on the setting itself, is that it will also benefit the enemies as well. So back to the original question, should you be running with Karmic Dice on or off? And I think if you're not a die-hard D&D fan, you're probably better off just playing with Karmic Dice on. It just means that you're going to have a bit of a smoother rolling overall. Larian claims that over a large sample size, it ends up being quite similar. So at least from what they've said publicly, that the system isn't so drastic that it will greatly reduce or change the outcome over a large sample size. So it's not like completely shifting the luck. It just kind of steps in when bad streaks are happening too much, and it starts to shift it back to make sure that it is varied. So in that case, I would say that if you want to have a smoother experience, you're not someone who plays tabletop games like this much, and you want to have that true randomness experience, then you can keep it on. And in general, if you have it on or off, and you're not someone who's a diehard fan, you may not even notice the difference as much. But if you're someone who is a tabletop fan and you want the cleanest, truest experience that you can get that is closer to tabletop, and that every time you pick up a physical die and you roll it, you don't know what's going to happen, and it's very possible for you to have some horrible, horrible luck. I'm sure anyone that's played tabletop of any kind knows that if you roll a physical die, it's very possible for you to get 5-6 turns in a row of very terrible luck, and things go very poorly, or you're doing dialogue options, or you're interacting in some way, and everything just goes completely horribly. And in those games, if you're playing true tabletop, there's no quick save or quick load option. So you would have to kind of live with the result, and that's part of the fun. So I would say that if you are someone that wants, if you're a casual player and you're playing Baldur's Gate 3 for the first time, I would say keep Karmic Dice on, let it do its work, let it do what it's good at, and helping smooth out that experience and give you variety over time. But also, if you want to go into your second or third playthrough, try playing with it off, especially since you know the encounters that are coming up for the most part. You know some of the dialogue options that are coming up. And when you play with Karmic Dice off, it feels like a little bit more edge of your seat, because it's very possible you're going to roll a whole bunch of nat 1s, or you could roll a whole bunch of nat 20s. The system's not going to get in the way of that. It is going to be a true RNG, random number generator reaction. And that's all I've got for you today. I just wanted to answer that question. People in my chat have been asking, and I actually didn't fully understand what the system was without more research. So there is the Karmic Dice system in Baldur's Gate 3. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below. Leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And I'll see you on my live stream. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content. Link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.